Hello. So, Nihilism by Father Seraphim Rose is one of the first books that I read about 6 or 7 years ago as I was inquiring and converting to the Orthodox faith. And I haven't read it since then. I don't even have my copy. I lent it to a friend who lent it to another friend, and I just haven't gotten it back. So, I guess that's a good thing, right? But yeah, I did take notes, so I thought it would be fun to kind of go back and revisit these points that were blowing my mind at the time and really connecting a lot of dots for me, and just kind of see how they hold up, with the way that I see the world today. So, without much preparation at all, let's just get into it here. So, um, at first, he kind of gets into the relative truth versus absolute truth. And if you see in the videos, and podcasts and streams that I've been, you know, consuming for a while now, it all started with like Jay Dyer, Jim Bob, and goes on from there. But this stuff has been hammered away so much, so I'm not going to get into it here, but he does go into the inadequacy of human reason to draw conclusions from observation. So at the time, I was, I did go to public school, American public school, and I did go to college. I was studying biochem, so I was getting brainwashed, in the whole scientism thing. I was really into science. I did put it on a pedestal quite a bit. So, yeah, we never in school really talked about the inadequacy of human reason or the inadequacy of, trusting your sense data to make inferences about the world and the limitations there. So, it was very important for me to read it through Father Seraphim Rose here. The theory of relative truth collapses, it itself being revealed as a self-contradictory absolute. And this is the first time I was introduced to that whole idea, like self-contradictory. Like, wow, you know, I just didn't study philosophy or logic or anything up to that point. So he gets into self-contradictory negative metaphysics. So first he starts with naive realism, aka naturalism, which rejects any ideal or spiritual absolute, claims the absolute truth of materialism and determinism. It is the official Marxist doctrine, and it is a suicidal philosophy, which renders all philosophy invalid, right? Because it rejects any ideals. Which is interesting to me because I thought that Marxism was all about the ideal, but I don't know. Like I said, I'm a slow boy, so this is just me like, whoa, learning all this stuff, right? Let's see. Am I sharing my screen the way that I was hoping to? I hope so. Okay. And you'll learn, like through tag argument, metaphysics is what underlies the particular science and is presupposed by it. So if you're gonna do science and claim to be a scientist, you have to admit that you have a universal metaphysic, I guess you could say. So there's a contradiction of purely materialistic and egoistic theory. So this guy, Vladimir, I guess that's how you say it, right? Vladimir Solovyov. Let's look up who that is. Am I sharing? Let's see. Yes. Yeah, that one. Can you share that? Hopefully you can see that. Okay, good. So it's Vladimir Solovyov. This guy? No, it's this guy. So let's see here. He was a philosopher, theologian, poet, pamphleteer, and literary critic of Russia who played a significant role in the development of Russian philosophy at the end of the 19th century. In his teens, he renounced Eastern Orthodoxy for nihilism, but later his disapproval of positivism saw him begin to express views that were in line with those of the Orthodox Church. He moved to St. Petersburg, where he became a friend and confidant of the writer Fyodor Dostoevsky. He was sympathetic to the Roman Catholic Church. What a jerk. He became renowned as a leading defender of Jewish civil rights in Tsarist Russia. The Jewish Encyclopedia describes him as a friend of the Jews and states that even on his deathbed, he is said to have prayed for the Jewish people. And it does say here that it is widely held that Solovyov was one of the sources for Dostoevsky's characters Alyosha Karamazov, which is interesting. Alyosha and Ivan, who that makes more sense to me, but I'm interested in how he was a source for this character development of Alyosha in the Brothers Karamazov. So yeah, that's who that is. And let's see, what did he say? Let's go back to, I'm no good at this, sorry. This. Okay, so he says, man descended from a monkey, consequently we shall love one another. And yeah, I don't know how he could derive this, that we shall love one another from man descended from a monkey. Okay, so the next negative metaphysic is critical realism, aka positivism. So whereas the previous naive realism, aka naturalism, rejects any ideal, this one is a straightforward denial of any metaphysical truth, and it only posits empirical truth. And the denial of absolute truth is itself an absolute truth, its own refutation. If you listen to debates, you've probably heard that. I know I have. Next is naive or doctrinaire agnosticism. Posits the absolute unknowability of any absolute truth, a variety of positivism. So, yeah, it's pretty much clear there. And then there's critical or pure agnosticism, which is total solipsism. Truth cannot be defined or measured at all. It's intellectually irresponsible, and it is the definitive abandonment of truth. And that goes back to this, right? The denial of absolute truth is itself an absolute truth, its own refutation. So it's interesting to learn how that kind of stuff works, you know? Like, I know in debates, people who don't understand philosophy, if you're like, no, you can't say this or you can't claim that because you don't presuppose this, you know? And these people who are not familiar with that are like, yes, I can. And, you know, it's just a mess, but you can't. You can't. And it's a logical claim of can't, not like you can't do it. Like, yeah, you could just run your mouth and say you do, whatever, but you can't logically or philosophically do that. Okay, so he gets into the nihilistic dialectic. He says, the despotism of science over practical life is contemporaneous with the advent of a whole series of pseudo-religious revelations. The two are correlative symptoms of the same malady, an abandonment of truth. Okay, so he gets into liberalism. It's really pragmatism or indifference to truth. This is a quote, a new God is clearly required by modern man, a God more closely fashioned after the pattern of such central modern concerns as science and business. It has, in fact, been an important intention of modern thought to provide such a God. This intention is clearly already in Descartes, It is brought to fruition in the deism of the Enlightenment, developed to its end in German idealism. The new God is not a being, but an idea. Not revealed to faith and humility, but constructed by the proud mind that still feels the need for explanation when it has lost its desire for salvation. This is the God, the dead God of philosophers who require only a first cause to complete their systems, as well as of positive thinkers and other religious sophists who invent a God because they need him and then think to use him at will. Whether deist, idealist, pantheist, or immanentist, all the modern gods are the same mental construct, fabricated by souls dead from the loss of faith in the true God. And to be honest, I see this kind of thing a lot where, especially in debates, I see this a lot. And I'm sorry to say, I'm not, obviously, I'm a total slow boy, but I've listened to enough debates on this side of the internet where I do see people using God as kind of an intellectual tool and not actually professing, the person of Christ. And I think that that's a trap, whether they mean to or not. I think that's a trap. So it's just something I've seen as a total slow boy outside observer. I see it in this way, just as Father Seraphim Rose explains. There's active nihilism. Okay, this is when things get a little bit scary. Oh, wait, so let's go to modern nihilism is liberal, humanist, agnostic. No longer ask the ultimate questions. It is skepticism plus disbelief. And I think it was it Justin Marler who was kind of explaining how we're already at this point, especially, the normies of today, we're already at this point where they're so numb to truth that even if it was right in their face, they just wouldn't care. They wouldn't care to know it, wouldn't care to understand it, wouldn't care to see it. So yeah, it really truly is. Let me just make sure everything's normal here. All right. Sorry, I'm already losing my voice. I don't think I can do this for too long, but I'll try to get through this page that I have here. Okay, so Nietzsche said, nihilism is not only the belief that everything deserves to perish, but one actually puts one soldier to the plow, one destroys. And we see that happening in all kinds of agendas, global agendas today. The profound responsibility the scholar once possessed, the communication of truth, has been reneged, and all the pretended humility that seeks to conceal this fact behind sophisticated chatter, or ideological claptrap, I think is what Jordan Peterson called it, on the limits of human knowledge, is but another mask of the nihilism the liberal academician shares, with the extremists of our day. Youth that, until it is re-educated in the academic environment, still thirsts for truth, is taught instead of truth the history of ideas. Wow. Or its interest is diverted into comparative studies. And the all-pervading relativism and skepticism inculcated in these studies is sufficient to kill, in almost all, the natural thirst for truth. Yeah. That's exactly what's happening. Sorry, I'm not trying to sound smart or anything. I just have a tendency to mumble. So I'm trying to over enunciate so you can understand me. Also, I don't have the best mic, so hopefully this is getting through clearly enough. So the next progression that he lays out is not realism. So liberalism, realism. Says no human soul found in autopsy, no God in outer space. Therefore, there is a hostility to truth. Sorry, I'm trying to make sense of my notes here. I don't know if I made these notes or if Father Seraphim Rose actually says this in the book. But he does say, realism becomes in fact a perfect parody of the Christian love of truth, where the Christian asks the ultimate meaning of everything and is not content until he sees that it is founded on God and his will, the realist likewise questions everything, but only to be able to abolish all suggestion of or aspiration to anything higher, and to reduce and simplify it into the terms of the most obvious and basic explanation. So it's like the Occam's razor thing, right? Which is it's a good tool to use, but we're using it to slice down everything, all meaning, everything that we understand about life and God and our connection to him. Yeah, it's like overused. So yeah, that's realism. Okay, the next step is vitalism, and this is where I found myself, because I did have like this atheist bent in my teens, and then in my 20s I was like a Joe Roganite type of person, right? And I was definitely looking for something. I was kind of getting into occult stuff or like witchcraft stuff. I was kind of looking into it, because people like forgive me for ever respecting this guy, but what's his name? Duncan Trussell would kind of have like podcasts with people kind of, getting into these different mystery schools or whatever. So, yeah, and I was very much into like Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson, also known as Space Santa, I think. I think his name is Space Santa. Um, anyway, so it's pseudo spirituality. And he says it's a cancer born of nihilism. Psychological disorientation, I think I wrote cult of the SJWs. Entheogens, right? There's a cult around the whole idea of psychedelics and how they're used and everything. Let's see what else. The only unchanging principle in this world is change itself. And I think if I think I've heard Jim Bob kind of go after that idea, especially when he's arguing against like evolution. Individuality, reduction of everything to subjective experience and sensation, which I said is like everything is like virtual reality, or like everything is like a simulation, right? A lot of people talk about that. When such pragmatism begins, nihilism passes into the vitalist stage, which may be defined as the elimination of truth as the criterion of human action and the substitution of a new standard, the life-giving, the vital. It is the final divorce of life from truth. I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around this, but I absolutely do see how if you have a vacuum, right, because you reject truth or the knowability of truth, yeah, all kinds of weird ideas are gonna start slipping into the culture. Realism, in its rage of truth, destroys truth. In the same way, vitalism, in its very quest for life, smells of death. Wow. Yeah, his writing is so good. Okay, and so here is the final progression. Nihilism of destruction. I said Nechayev, so let me try to get my try to get this thing back. Let's look up Nechayev so we understand who that is. Yes, you can. Wait. I think it must be this one. Sergei Nechayev was a Russian anarcho-communist in the late 1800s, part of the Russian nihilist movement, known for his single-minded pursuit of revolution by any means necessary, including revolutionary terror. Okay, so this guy was a total monster, right? So this is a quote from the book. The spiritual eye in fallen human nature is not sound, as every Orthodox Christian knows. We see in this life only dimly and require faith. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, I'm not showing my screen. Excuse me, sorry. Try that again. The spiritual eye in fallen human nature is not sound. Yeah, our noetic faculty is not sound. As every Orthodox Christian knows, we see in this life only dimly and require faith and the grace of God to effect a healing that will enable us in the future life to see clearly once more. The first stage of nihilism, liberalism, is born of the errors of taking our diseased eye for a sound eye. Yeah, absolutely. People really don't have um, that idea of the fallen or fallenness, you know, of making its impaired vision for a view of the true world, and thus of discharging the position of the soul, the church, whose ministrations are not needed by a healthy man. In the second stage, realism, the disease no longer tended by the necessary physician begins to grow. Vision is narrowed. Distant objects, already obscure enough in the natural state of impaired vision, become invisible. Only the nearest objects are seen distinctly, and the patient becomes convinced no others exist. Yeah, this is what I was talking about with Justin Marler. In the third stage, vitalism, infection leads to inflammation. Even the nearest objects become dim and distorted, and there are hallucinations. Yep. In the fourth stage, the nihilism of destruction, blindness ensues and the disease spreads. Disease spreads to the rest of the body, effecting agony, convulsions, and death. Wow. So he says that this is the nihilist program. Number 1, rebellion, the war against God. Yeah. Number 2, the worship of nothingness. I don't know where these quotes come from, but let's just see. Creation ex nihilo, God's creation of the world, not out of himself, not out of some pre-existent matter or primal chaos, but out of nothing. In no other doctrine is the omnipotence of God so plainly stated. The never dimmed marvelousness of God's creation has its foundation precisely in this fact that it was called into existence from absolute non-existence. And this was one of the very powerful points that I think I was like listening to Jay Dyer lectures at the time, and he was really hammering away at creatio ex nihilo and how like if you really believe in God, you know, you have to check your definition of God, because if your definition of God, you know, if he is not powerful and marvelous enough to create the world, everything out of nothing, then who are you even like worshiping, you know? That's a lesser God. So that was a very powerful point for me. I remember that. Nihilists, in their attempt, prove the existence of God they deny, and in their failure, testify to his power and glory. Forgive me, I'm not really sure how that leads to that, but yeah, we know it's true anyway. Okay, so this is rhetoric. Number 1, destruction of the old order, which is Christendom or patriarchy, which we know like the back of our hand that that's what they want to do. Number 2, the making of the new earth, right? Globalism. And I wrote that violence is required. And this is something he talks about, the mystique of violence, seeing a magical change to be wrought in human nature through indulgence of the passions of anger, hatred, resentment, and the will to dominate. And I was thinking, like, maybe not only, you know, I know that they want to change man, the nature of man, into the fashioning of the new man, which is the next point here. But it's like thinking about all the atomic bomb, like test bombs and all just this crazy like destruction that happened, you know, in the 20th century. Um, is this all just like for the same end, right? For this mystique of violence, this like phoenix thing. Okay, so the fashioning of the new man. Raw material of every demagogue's dream, the free thinker and skeptic, closed only to the truth, but open to each new intellectual fashion because he himself has no intellectual foundation. The seeker, after some new revelation, ready to believe anything new because true faith has been annihilated in him. The planner and experimenter, worshipping fact because he has abandoned truth, seeing the world as a vast laboratory, must study, in which he is free to determine what is possible. Yeah. The autonomous man, pretending to the humility of only asking his rights. Ooh. Yet full of the pride that expects everything to be given him in a world where nothing is authoritatively forbidden. Yeah. The man of the moment, without conscience or values, and thus at the mercy of the strongest stimulus, the rebel, hating all restraint and authority because he himself is his one and only God. The mass man, this new barbarian, thoroughly reduced and simplified and capable of only the most elementary ideas, yet scornful of anyone who presumes to point out the higher things or the real complexity of life. Don't you know it? If you try to like open up a dialogue with like a normie, yeah, it doesn't go very well. So I was like trying back then to get into all these topics that were like going on tangents, and I didn't get too far, but there was a book that Father Seraphim Rose mentions. I couldn't find it. I did find a PDF, which I really don't like reading on screens, but I did kind of copy a bunch of text. Maybe if anyone's interested, I can go into this. But basically, it's called The Tower and the Abyss. It's by Eric Collar. It says an inquiry into the transformation of man. And as I was reading it, I was like, is this a warning or a manual? You know? I mean, I think there's so many books where you're like, oh, is this a warning? Like Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. We're like, oh, is this a warning? But as we learn, it's like, no, it's a manual. So it's called The Tower and the Abyss. And my understanding of it, it goes through, let's see, economic, technological, political, scientific, educational, psychic, and artistic, like literature and art, visual arts. It kind of analyzes all these things at the time, and it tries to break down human nature. Which I don't know. Is that what like existentialism is? I was trying to like learn what that is, where yeah, the existentialist attitude or a sense of disorientation, confusion, or dread in the face of an apparently meaningless and absurd world. Through art and literature and ideas and culture, and also I know, of course, there were all the, you know, unethical experiments that happened. So yeah, I was looking into all these movements like dadaism, surrealism. I was gonna look into psychoanalysis, like Freud. Um, I did look into a lot of the artists that Father Sam from Rose brought up, like Alberto Giacometti. He made a lot of, let's see if I can show this. He made some weird sculptures and stuff like this. And I see them everywhere. Actually, I was just watching a movie. I think it was Blink Twice, which is about like an elite pagan ritual, like weirdness. And they had these, I'm pretty sure they must have been like legit Giacometti sculptures of these really thin people. And I've looked into like the museum, I forget what it's called now. I think it's like Louisiana or something, where they have a bunch of his works, and there's like a video of, what's her name? Marina Abramovich, like meditating in front of them or something. So there's definitely something really weird. They were also on the Swiss bank currency notes, I guess, or whatever. So yeah. Um, so it's kind of this forming of man, like he's just clay, you know. And I would like to actually before I do, I want to look into Alberto Giacometti. There was also John Dubuffet, really weird art, just horrible to look at. He coined the term art brut, meaning raw art. It just looks like vomit to me. Francis Bacon, I'm sure you've seen those. Those are like from hell, basically. Um, Reflecting on the reaction of critics and the public, Bacon offered, I've never known why my paintings are known as horrible. I'm always labeled with horror, but I never think about horror. Pleasure is such a diverse thing. Weird. And horror is too. Can you call the famous Eisenheim altar a horror piece? It's one of the greatest paintings of the crucifixion, with the body studded with nails, thorn like nails. But oddly enough, the form is so grand, it takes away from the horror. But that is the horror in the sense that is so vitalizing. Ah, there's that word. Isn't that how people came out of the great tragedies? Mm. People came out as though purged into happiness, into a fuller reality of existence. See, he was on board with that whole thing. Kenneth Armitage, Henry Moore. From Collar's Tower in the Abyss, he said Henry Moore's figure combinations where the locus of gravity seems to have moved to the intricate interrelations of the periphery, a periphery which surrounds the lack of a center, an almost symbolically empty core. Wow. So, yeah, I just wanted to say, like, I have all these other notes, and that might make a cool video or stream for another time. Just going into that book, because I never really hear anyone talk about this book, to be honest with you. I don't ever think I've heard anyone mention this book. Yeah, he was a friend of Einstein. I don't know if I mentioned that already. Um, so let's stop sharing that and go back to, yes, this thing. Okay, let's look up Alberto Giacometti real quick. Yeah, there's his stuff. There he is. So this one's interesting. It's like he's leaning forward, like he has a purpose, um, or just aimlessly like walking. Um, I don't know. I was just so creeped out by this stuff when I was looking into it. Look at that. There he is, forming his man, his new man. I saw that this is kind of like he's like almost like falling or something, a man almost falling. So yeah, it's really creepy. I don't know. Would you want to go to a museum with these things in the room or this? Like they're really big. I mean, it's just really creepy stuff. Oh, look at this. It's like shocking. Like it really strips away the image of God from man. Okay, so now I do want to show, stop screen. I do want to show some of the books actually I found. So this is New Images of Man. I definitely didn't read it, but it has a lot of, you can see this stuff. Really wild art. Sorry, this is kind of awkward. Let's see what else I can find here. Oh, there's Pollock. Oh, look at this. This is Richier. see what else. Just lots of examples of the new image of man that they want, which is like a golem, right? It's like a golem, just totally controlled with no connection to God, completely cut off. So that's that book. I was actually trying to sell it because I don't really want it. So if anyone wants it, please let me know. Here's one that's in really good condition called The Insiders. I definitely didn't read it. It's Rejection and Rediscovery of Man in the Arts of Our Time. It's exactly what we were just describing from the notes there. So yeah, a lot more examples. I think there's some like Francis Bacon stuff in here. Kern. I mean, this is so creepy. Creepy stuff. Beyond creepy. Let's see. So yeah, I just wanted to take a look at the books that Father Seraphim Rose was mentioning there in his book. Just want to do a little deeper dive, and I haven't, like I said, looked into any of this stuff for years, so I thought it'd be fun to do it here. But yeah, that's about all I have here. Yeah, if anyone's interested, let me know in the comments if you want me to take a look at some of the quotes that I mined from The Tower and the Abyss, which is a book that I just don't really hear anyone ever talking about. So there might be some stuff to glean. Like I said, I'm not like DPH or J Dyer. I have absolutely no knowledge at all. I'm a total slow boy, but hey, maybe getting information filtered through a slow boy like me is useful in some way. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.